state like this, where you see so much growth and so much change constantly, having a limited government apparatus on top of that and a robust private sector has been really good for us.
Hi, I'm Alexis Garcia with ReasonTV, and joining me is Erica Grieder. She's the senior editor at Texas Monthly Magazine and also author of the book Big, Hot, Cheap, and Right: What America Can Learn from the Strange Genius of Texas. So Erica, we've heard a lot of kind of boasting about this big Texas miracle about the economy and jobs. Is the swagger deserved?
It's all totally true. On the economy side, at least, it's been sort of a ridiculous thing to cover as a journalist because for the past 10, 12 years, pretty much every economic metric you would look at is better than you see in the country as a whole, better than you see in most states, good for Texas, and also pretty broad-based. It's not just growth for the 1%, it's growth for the middle class, the working class, in most industry sectors. It's consistent, it's been going on for a long time, so yeah, we're doing really well.
No, and I asked that because, you know, in 2012, when Rick Perry kind of stepped into the national spotlight with his presidential run, you had a lot of people like Paul Krugman come out and try to really discount the fact that this was actually happening, that it was too good to be true.
Yeah, it was, I think it was pretty crazy, pretty intense. Part of why I wrote the book was just like the amount of bad information going out about this. It was partly political, I think, because Perry's a Republican, it's a Republican state, it's the biggest Republican state in the country, it's the most important Republican state in the country, and maybe partly it was because people have this feeling about Texas, like it can't possibly be doing that well. It's this sort of belligerent state, you know, not that smart of a state, or whatever their conceptions are. But the critique of it, I was really surprised by, especially at a time when the country was not doing that well. I mean, I would think you at least stop to check the numbers first, rather than try to attack them, but maybe not.
You know, you looked at unemployment, you looked at the net jobs created, and it wasn't all because, you know, they think they're trying to attribute that to oil, but that wasn't the case. What do you really attribute the flourishing economy to?
Well, there were a couple of things people would say about it. I mean, oil was one. They'd say, oh, it's oil jobs, which is, okay, there was growth in oil and gas in the past 10 years. It's an important part of state GDP, has been for a while. It really drives GDP, though, rather than employment. It's capital intensive. Then they would say, oh, these are all minimum wage and MIC jobs, which I kind of didn't like, first of all, because, I mean, who are we to say what a MIC job is or what a good job is or not? But also, they weren't just low-wage jobs. You could see jobs in every income quartile. And the data was all good. It didn't come from Rick Perry. It came from the Dallas Fed. So I think the state's always had a focus on business historically, not just the current leaders, but the leaders of the past. It's a small state model, and so that means you need a pretty robust private sector and you need a lot of industry. And there have been times when the state has not done well, like during the 80s when Texas's economy really collapsed. I think that made the state more sensitive to the need for economic diversification, and we've seen that happen since the 80s. So now you have an economy that's not so much driven by resources as it once was.
Free market people look at Texas as an example, but it's not as free market as you would think it is.
It's not totally free. I mean, I think that Mercatus does a ranking and put us about 24th, 25th for regulatory freedom. And I think that there certainly is a tendency in the state, like if you are being overregulated and you go to IJ or you go to the legislature and you ask for less regulation and you have a case for it, you can often get that done, unless there's some other lobby against you or there's some pressing need.
We've heard a lot of talk from Democrats and from President Obama himself saying that their major goal is to turn Texas blue.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening?
No, not this year for sure. Maybe in 2018. They always talk about in terms of demographics, the state's getting younger. It's going to be, I think, majority Hispanic in the next few years. It's already majority minority, quote unquote. It's getting more urbanized. It's getting more educated. So you're starting to see a different kind of constituency in the big cities. But so far, no, we're not seeing the Democrats put out the candidates or the campaigns or really the message. The Republicans aren't either, which is kind of interesting. And there's a couple of good ones coming out, but given how well the state has done, I've been surprised by how the state Republican Party in this last set of primaries is focused on issues that nobody cares about, like the 17th Amendment, or further marginal abortion restrictions, or further gun laws. I mean, I think those are interesting policy debates, but really not the key issues in a state growing this much, and that's this big.
I look at Texas, and this is a state that gave us Ron Paul, it gave us Ross Perot. Do you see any more libertarian, independent type politician here that could break out on the national level?
Well, this is an interesting question, because I think that a lot of Texas Republicans, a lot of Texans in general, are sort of quasi-libertarian or tacitly libertarian because of the issues they prioritize, right? So even someone like Perry, he's a conservative, he's a fiscal conservative, he's a social conservative. But if you think about the course of his administration, and it's been more than a decade, he's really put fiscal issues first. He hasn't really advanced social issues. I think that the social conservative movement is just kind of intrinsically at odds with the libertarian side of the party. But if those issues aren't being advanced from the social conservative side, then you don't see the tension become so manifest. You don't see the fact that they want to regulate virtue, regulate people's private lives, in tension with the libertarian ethos that more often has sway. But none of them really frame it that way. I mean, Ron Paul does, but most of the others just frame it as conservative, not even Republican at this point, just conservative. So I'm not sure that this time around that cause is being well advanced.
What has been the role of the Christian right here, and is it really indicative of how most Texans are?
I think that's a really good question. I think that historically the religious right has been, or the religious community in general, has been one of those institutions that has helped supplement a very small government. And you see that back in the frontier days, that you would have preachers on the Methodist and Baptist circuit come to town and sort of give some sermons, but also do a little bit of ad hoc jurisprudence and even start talking about the need for education. So I think that's part of why they have a role in the state, is that they have a history of being involved in public life. But we haven't seen them generally have power at the state level. And I don't think most Texans really want that or think in those terms. This time around, we've seen a bit of a explicitly religious resurgence. I mean, right now we're going to go for some runoffs. The candidate leading the lieutenant governor primary is somebody who's been saying, I'm a Christian first, a conservative second. And he didn't win the primary, but he's leading going into the runoff. And I was surprised by that. I don't think that is where the mainstream of the state is, or even the mainstream of the Republican Party. But, you get a low turnout election. And
do you think that's a nod, though, towards the Tea Party, though, that typically tends to be a little bit more active and turn out to vote?
Well, they certainly, I'm not sure if we even say the Tea Party or the religious right or the far right or what we say these days, because there was certainly a conservative subset of the Republican Party that turned out in the primary in big numbers. But, they're all pretty conservative in the Republican primary. So which part was really activated? Was it the Tea Party or the religious right or the church groups? It seems like more of the latter. The Tea Party, though, I think is a movement that has a divide between its libertarian side and its Christian conservative side, which I think is not a divide that became manifest with somebody like Ted Cruz, who I think is closer to the libertarian side of that tendency than the Christian conservative side. But I guess we'll see the tension become unignorable if this continues.
Well, Erica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you.
For Reason TV, I'm Alexis Garcia.